right, we'll call this meeting of the Policy Committee to order. First on our agenda, we have, we're going to do introductions, and we're just going to do the sort of extended dais. So, Kara, would you like to start?
Yes. Kara Bradshaw, Executive Assistant.
Marion Kane, Senior Legal Counsel.
Liz Large, Contractor General Counsel.
Julia Brim-Edwards, Policy Committee Chair and Board Member.
Patty Sullivan, Board Member.
Yeah. Eddie Wong, Board Member.
Thank you. And then I'm going to just note that Michelle DePass is also a member of this committee. She's not able to come today. So if we are going to send anything out of committee today, it will, I think it'll be a sense of the committee since Michelle's not here, and obviously you can share your point of view, but it'll be going to the full board, so that should work. Do you know how she's going to vote? All right, next we're going to turn to public comment. Kara, I'm going to note that we had some written public comment that's been submitted, that's been posted, and also we have some public comment for today.
Yes. Would you like me to call them individually, or there's two people signed up together since we're down here in this room?
You can call them individually.
Okay. Christine Hanelsky.
Just go ahead. Great, thank you. My name is Christine Hanelsey. I'm the Vice President of Oyanokai, which is the parent organization that oversees the Japanese dual language immersion program. And I'm here speaking on behalf of the JDLI as well as the Mandarin and the Vietnamese programs. We're here to talk about the proposed policy change for international travel programs. And I wanted to start off first by thanking the committee for all the hard work that you put into drafting a policy that we found to be fair and equitable and exactly the sort of thing that will contribute to the success of this program. We understand that the district had some responses and some additional arguments to modify your proposal. And I wanted to point out a couple of things, discrepancies and maybe misstatements that showed up in that policy letter. While we appreciate that the district wants to allow an additional 2 days for travel time, especially for these long programs, we don't think that that really addresses the original concern that the committee was focused on, which was allowing enough time for an immersion language program, an academic program to actually be successful for the students. I'm just going through a couple of quick things here. My full statement is in the packet. I wanted to point out that the fiscal impact that was described in the packet, in the staff letter, was not actually entirely correct. They listed out the substitute fees, the cost of the programs, things like that, but what they did not explain was that none of those costs are borne by PPS or by non-traveling students or families or by individual schools. Those are all paid through trip fees, independent fundraising, grants, things like that that the parent organizations organize. So there is no actual fiscal impact to PPS for these programs. Is that my 2 minutes already? I also just wanted to quickly say that to the best of our knowledge, there is no data from PPS that supports their assertion that 10 days out of the classroom, the home classroom, will lead to significant learning loss or other difficulties in integrating back into the classroom on their return. On the other hand...
I'm sorry, can you wrap up?
Yes. Okay, I'll leave it at that. My full statement, again, is in the packet. I have copies, if anybody would like that, in hard copy, and I can email them to anybody who wishes. Thank you.
Great, thank you for coming today, and we'll make sure that the non-committee members also get a copy of
Thank you very much.
Statement as well. As we'll distribute all the public comment we get on this to all the board members before we have a second reading.
Thank you.
Jade Z.
Thank you for hearing me out. As a former student, I'm concerned by the unilaterally anti-technology nature of the proposed policy. Oh, my name is Jade Zaslawski. Yeah. Many students, both ones with and without disabilities, think of their personal devices as an extension of their personal capabilities, an attitude that's honestly going to be really good for them in college and the workplace, given how much note-taking, communication with professors and so on happens almost entirely on devices. And a policy that's focused exclusively on taking away or limiting use of devices is definitely the easy way to enforce uniformity and maintain discipline in the classroom. But I strongly believe it's worth the effort to try to work with rather than against students' technological adaptations to their environment. As written, the proposed policies don't have any guidance or flexibility for schools to work with students, and I think that there's a lot of value in considering positive vision for what it would look like to cooperatively use technology, and allow students to bring their technology into the classroom. I think that that's entirely achievable. That's all. Thank you. I cede the remainder of my time.
Thank you for coming today and sharing your point of view.
That concludes who we have signed up for public comment.
Great. Thank you, those individuals who came to share their perspectives. It's the next, the items on our agenda we have, first, we're going to have a discussion about two policies that are currently, we've had a lot of discussion about and revisions, and potentially looking today at moving them out of committee, potentially if we're done, if we feel like they're ready for a first reading for comment. The first one is high school credit earned prior to 9th grade. And we have the revisions in front of us, and I think what would you like them to make a presentation?
Yes.
Okay. So if you could introduce yourself and maybe a short presentation on the changes. This is a policy relating to high school credit earned prior to 9th grade. There's been community questions, concerns, recommendations made, and also there's been, I think, a robust discussion with our educators at the district. So if you want to go ahead and share the changes that you're proposing to bring forward, and then we'll have either any committee discussion and questions.
Good afternoon. I'm Filip Hristic, Senior Director for High School Academics.
And good afternoon, Lorna Fast Buffalo Horse, Senior Director of Secondary Schools and MPG Programs. And we are back to discuss further revisions to the policy which allows PPS schools to grant high school credit before 9th grade. Since our last time before you, we have met with the two TAG Advisory Committee co-chairs, or TAGAC co-chairs.
We shared with the TAGAC co-chairs that we have refined our proposed changes for the policy 6.10.100-P to differentiate between essentially two things. One, how we relate to in-district cases where students have the opportunity to earn high school credit while in middle school, and then how we treat transfer students who are transferring into Portland Public Schools. For in-district cases in PPL's middle schools, we as a district have a responsibility to ensure that the content, materials, assessments, standards, facilities, time allocation, and teacher qualifications are all equivalent to high schools for the specific courses designated by the superintendent to be eligible for high school credit.
And for the non-PPS cases, we really worked in this version to try to clarify that students with credits on a transcript from an accredited high school will be able to transfer those credits into a PPS high school and count them toward graduation at PPS. This applies whether a student earned those credits prior to ninth grade or during high school. The key here is that the sending school district recognize those credits as high school credits by placing them on a high school transcript. As long as the sending school is accredited, those credits are treated the same as any other transfer credits.
So if this policy is approved, we will then begin working on the administrative directives. The AD will detail how families of PPS middle school students will be notified of courses eligible for high school credit, as well as the implications for grades earned in middle school as far as transcripts are concerned. Currently, notifications happen through middle school counselors who review information with middle school students and families during forecasting. This happens every year. This includes courses that are eligible for high school credit. Every year, school admin, particularly our middle school admin, are informed of district expectations regarding staffing and scheduling. And so for our middle school colleagues, that includes clarifying what middle school courses are eligible for high school credit and what requirements those courses need to meet. We have a specific form that middle school admin fill out certifying that their courses meet these requirements. And then our middle school teachers also review with their middle school students at the end of the year what options they have as far as whether their grades will or will not appear on high school transcripts, and they send letters home informing student families as well.
So the future administrative directive will also detail procedures for designating approved courses within PPS, for recording the credits, transferring them to the student's permanent high school record. We have committed to meet again with the TAGAC co-chairs prior to the finalization of the draft AD. And then we would like to propose another revision that is not on the copy that you received in advance of this meeting. And that would be to remove number 3 on international transfers. Administrative Directive 4.20.024 already details the criteria for granting credits to students who transfer in from another country. So it probably is not necessary in this policy.
Just a question about that. What policy is that AD connected to?
I didn't, it wasn't obvious when I looked, but
Some cleanup.
I think it's,
We have some floaters. And they can float. Floating subway.
Okay.
It was originally part of the diploma.
So maybe we want to,
Align them with the diploma policy.
Great, thank you for the presentation. I have just an overarching question. It relates a little bit to that last one. Is because we've mixed in here a little bit what credits from middle school apply, but then also like what high school credits apply if you were in another high school. Do we have a policy generally on high school credits?
The diploma policy. I'm not sure what your question is, sorry.
Well, it's just the policy's titled high school credits earned prior to ninth grade, but we have some things in here that are also talking about credits earned in in a different high school, right?
what we wanted to really do, because I'm sure everybody remembers, we had a case where a student a middle school student took a high school course in their middle school in another district and asked to transfer it into PPS. It was not a course that PPS generally grants credit for in the middle school. And ultimately what we realized was that that other district had transcripted it on a high school transcript. And so we were able to treat it like any other high school transfer student. So that is partly what we were trying to clarify here.
I guess the question I'm wondering about is should it still be titled the high school credit earned prior to ninth grade, or is this policy now brought in that?
Because it applies to both internal and external.
Or not just middle school credit?
The policy answers the question of can students and how can students earn high school credit before high school? And we say we have one answer for our current students, and we have a slightly different answer for students who are transferring in. For our PPS students, we have a process in place. We verify that the middle school courses offered for high school credit meet the criteria and are essentially the equivalent of the high school, the same course that is offered in high schools. When it comes to transfer students, we say as long as their credits show up on an accredited high school transcript, we will recognize them as transcribed, even if the credits they earned aren't credits that our own students can earn in middle schools.
Well, if it's on a high school transcript, but they aren't a high school student yet, how does it get on a high school transcript?
It just means that their host school district determined already that those
okay.
courses are equivalent.
So they got it up.
They transcribed
eligible.
it. We say we trust them as an accredited institution to do their due diligence, and we will recognize their credit.
Okay.
It looks like student director has a question. I don't know if you all can see that.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. So I have two questions. The first one is kind of what did the student engagement look like when developing this process?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, my question was, what did the student engagement look like when developing this policy?
We did not engage with students on this.
I have an answer to that. JJ, actually, the modifications to this policy are coming about because students came and testified at a board meeting, which seems like that counts as student engagement. They raised the issue of credit not being granted by PPS and what standards there were.
Okay, and just to clarify, will middle school students, I know some middle school students take advanced math and Spanish during their middle school, and I was wondering, will they still be able to receive a high school credit?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Eddie or Patty, do you have questions? I have another question, but I think I'm going to first just dispense with some easy mechanical work. The recommendation from staff is to remove number 3 because it's an administrative directive, and I'm wondering if that's okay with the committee?
Maybe say something that it is somewhere else. So
It's somewhere
people
else,
reading this-
yeah.
Okay. I mean, say in this document that it's somewhere else so people will know where to look and not feel like it's not taken care of.
Hopefully I'm going to address that in a minute,
Yep.
because I don't like to have floating ADs, so it should connect to something somewhere.
Yeah. Thanks for asking my opinion. I'm not officially part of this committee, but I'll give my opinion anyways. I think it's fine to remove it because it's not limiting anything by removing it, right? And it can always be addressed somewhere else. So I think it's not harming anything by removing it. It just makes everything a little cleaner.
Okay, so we'll remove that based on the recommendation. I'm going to ask staff if they can look at the AD in which that's in to see if we could actually find a policy that it would attach to, so that we don't, I don't know, maybe it's the diploma, not in this meeting, but just going forward, so that.
I think what I would say is we endeavor to make sure that when someone looks at the policy pages that has policies and ADs, they can find information. Can I say that? I'm not sure it's hard to address the specific it's a logic, we're trying to make sure the reader, the person looking for information, can identify it in a pretty voluminous policy and AD manual, so we're trying to, that's the objective, which I think is in line with yours, but I don't know it's exactly the same means of implementation necessarily, and it might be.
So I'm not asking to change the AD, it's just like,
Oh, yeah. I didn't think you-
having like ADs are supposed to be implementing policies generally. So somehow having it connected to some policy. And I don't.
I understand.
Okay.
Thank you.
I wouldn't need to do that right now, but just like, that would be a cleanup. The more that we can get rid of the floaters, just, I think, makes it, because otherwise then people are like, oh, we want you to change the AD, and we're like, well, no, that's not our job, that's like the staff implementation, and they're like, well, where's your policy that you're changing? So, okay. The question I have remaining, I'm really appreciate the revisions. I think it's more clear. I also appreciate you meeting with TAGAC and listening to their concerns. The place that I feel that there's still not clarity, and I'm going to just keep coming back to this, is the statement, where number is it in, about the middle schools? There's some, okay, in CB, it's a designated PPS middle school courses equivalent to high school courses as determined by the superintendent or the superintendent designee according to the following criteria are essentially eligible.
It's eligible.
Yeah.
It's eligibility criteria.
As a parent, I'm still trying to think, like, so where is that? Like, where is that information? Like, where could I go find it? And certainly wanting to be able to find it, for example, before my student enrolled in a class. Yeah. And I'm looking for somewhere that, like, this is going to be on the website, or if as my understanding is that middle school counselors are sharing that with students, but they must, what eligible courses there are, but that must be coming from somewhere here centrally. So where is that, and where could a parent find that? And not like you have to get it from your student, because that may or may not happen. It also raises questions, just, well, it's just, to me, it's not, it's opaque.
Yeah, I think that there can be some improvements, and we really saw that as part of the AD process, but to have some kind of notification from the district that points people to the courses available in their middle school, and we don't know that that is kind of a centralized communication that's happening at this time.
So we're a system of schools, and part of the middle school redesign that we've had for a long time is to create sort of equitable and standardized courses at our middle schools, given the sort of decade-long inequity, especially in Southeast and Northeast, where you went to the K-8s and there was inequitable. So through the AD process, will there be somewhere centrally that parents, the designation, again, I'm not weighing in at all on like what should be eligible and what shouldn't be. I'm just like, how are people going to know that?
Yeah.
We can easily add information to the middle school redesign webpage that speaks broadly around what's available, and directing families to reach out to their students' counselor for more information. This information is definitely shared annually through the forecasting process, through slide decks, letters home, etc. But we can also have a central location where families can be directed to as well.
I'm supportive of sending out a first reading, but I won't support a second reading unless there's, because otherwise I think we're gonna be stuck in the same place, that there's more clarity on like what qualifies, but it's still, as a parent, I still wouldn't know, like, where do I go find that information out?
I think we agree with you that we need to have some more clarity on that. Are we wrong to think that would be something, that would be part of the AD rather than the policy?
Since the board doesn't say what's in an AD, I mean, generally, you could have a general reference, like it'll be available on the district website, or however we communicate other.
Or it's available on the district website. I mean, I think what you're saying is, it's not currently on the website, we can put it on the website. And I think what you're saying is, it should be on the website, and it needs to be on the website before the second reading. Have I translated that?
Yeah, I mean,
So-
I don't
We
want to
can
be
put it on
caught in
the
the
website.
same circle that, so we don't tell you what can be in the AD, so, slip it.
But I think the staff report to the board for the second reading could include a link to show where it is on the website.
Sure.
That would be great. Again,
Yeah.
it's not trying to tell you which courses are eligible, but more, how do we help parents find that information?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, should we send this to the board for first reading? Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for sending that, the
you.
extensive revisions, meeting with parents. Also thank the students who brought this forward. JJ, did you have anything else you wanted to add or ask?
No.
Okay. And then we'll be sending it out with B3 removed. No. The section that they asked to have removed. All right. The next policy that we have before us is the diploma. Nope. It's diploma requirements. Do you have somebody?
Philippe, I think you might be up on the diploma policy too.
Sorry, you're on a roll. Do you want to share the recommended changes that
The
staff?
diploma policy, or do you want me to?
I would love for you to take the lead, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Sure. The legislature made some changes to, if you look at the, it's not some. it's not
Is this
some-
about personal finance and?
No,
Heck?
this is about the change of certificate of attendance.
Okay,
To a
please.
certificate of attendance.
Mhm.
We don't have the red line version, unfortunately, but the legislature made changes, so it's now called the certificate of, let me see, pull it up. It's in section 4. This is new language. It's really just a change to the name of it. It's a certificate of attendance now. The old nomenclature was, please help me with that
Modified
part.
diploma?
It's
No.
not a modified.
It's not. So we have extended diplomas and now,
A certificate of attendance is for students who aren't able to complete the mandatory amount of credits due to, typically to like long-term hospitalizations and things like that. And so they are provided a certificate attesting to their limited attendance in school. There's also a requirement that's included in here that talks about the notice that we must give to students that the certificate of attendance means that they may not say that they have graduated from a school when they are applying for jobs, et cetera, because it does not constitute that they're a graduate.
So is number 4, certificate of attendance, all new? No,
Just pull that.
The,
because the policy version we have pulled up doesn't have any red line changes
I
in
know.
it.
I know. It doesn't.
I'm trying to look at the language change, sorry.
This doesn't help a public meeting well, but
I'm sorry.
this, no, that's not, that's just. So we can get a copy to the board, I mean, I don't know if you wanna take it over. Patty,
So, I'll just summarize it.
yeah.
So for those in attendance or watching the meeting, there is new language that has been added and modified to a section called, it was called Alternative Certificate Requirements. It's now Certificate of Attendance, and it establishes a certificate of attendance. And the only main substantive change, other than changing the name, is that it now says, the language did say, an alternative certificate will be awarded based on a student's needs and achievement, and this now says, a certificate of attendance will be awarded to students who have maintained regular full-time attendance for at least 4 years beginning in grade 9.
Yeah.
This is a legislative change, so this is, we're just following the language of the statute.
So what does that really mean, that they've attended but they have not gotten credit, have not been able to get credit?
They've attended for 4 years, but it's been sporadic due to, the example that was given to us, this came through the special education department, is major medical issues that cause a student not to be able to attend regularly enough to achieve the credits that they need to, but they have been enrolled in a school for 4 years. They just haven't been able to achieve the credits necessary.
I would say the sort of distinction would be like somebody who doesn't earn enough credits. It might be, oh, they dropped out, and this is like somebody has persisted and had.
They've been enrolled for the last 4 years, right? They haven't dropped out of school. They are continuing.
Mhm.
They continue every year in an attempt to complete the requirements, but.
So this is something the legislature said, school districts, in addition to providing diplomas, and here's the diploma requirements, here's a certificate of attendance that districts need to offer.
Correct.
And so this is us incorporating that into our
And
policies.
that's B, but A, another certificate of attendance.
Well, that's because
Different.
it's saying they haven't met the diploma requirements, so they haven't met the 24 credits in the different areas.
Mhm. Whether they've attended all 4 years or not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that just needs to clarify, because it says, award to students who meet the minimum requirement for attendance or for credits, and then
It's
established
not-
by the district, and do not satisfy the requirements for a high school diploma. So you meet the minimum requirements, but you don't, so the minimum requirements for what?
Right. It's not very
Enrollment?
clear.
The minimum requirements for a diploma. Wait,
No,
which
for,
section
it's
are you
the
on?
minimum
A.
requirements for enrollment, I think. It's that,
For attendance.
Okay, so it should say attendance then, because then it's confusing, because it says it has to meet the minimum requirements
so
established by
meeting the
district.
minimum attendance requirements?
Yeah.
Oh, do you
And
want
if
your-
that's true, how
No,
are,
it's-
Sorry.
We will change it to clarify, but I think attendance would not actually be the appropriate word, because one of the reasons they're not able to complete the requirements is that there's been interruptions in their attendance.
and so how are A and B different?
Are there other,
Yeah, I think the issue perhaps is the A implies that students receiving certificate of attendance have met the district requirements, when in fact, this is not a high school diploma. And it's maybe, that part may be confusing, that these students are receiving a certificate of attendance, verifying that they've attended school, but they're not actually receiving a high school diploma.
Because they did not get the
Because
credit
they
for
did
the
not
courses
meet
they.
the requirements to
They
earn a high
took.
school diploma.
And just add it to this one, you can combine.
Okay,
Exactly the same, but they can be combined.
we're gonna.
Student Director Kunsevi has a question.
JJ?
Yeah, and to clarify, will students still be allowed to walk for graduation if they have a certificate of attendance?
Yes.
Director Brim-Edwards, I just wanted to note that the red line is now in board book.
Great. We're gonna suggest combining A and B, so I think it would be the B, and then followed by, after grade 9, comma, and then the but from A, the but clause from A, but do not satisfy the requirements for a high school diploma, modified diploma, or extended diploma. So essentially just removing that first clause in it.
Right,
Does
because they seem
that work
to-
as the English teacher?
Yeah, it was very strange.
Does that work for you, Eddie?
Yeah. I assume there's going to be an AD that would clarify specifically what that means, but yeah. Are we looking at A and B right now?
Mhm.
Is that what you're asking?
We're gonna be removing the first clause in 4A, and then
Okay.
taking the second clause, but do not satisfy, and we're taking that and dropping it to be the second part of B.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, are you all good with that?
Yeah.
Since this is a statutory, we're following the state statute, I'm not sure there's much more to discuss, but is there any objection to moving it out of committee for a first reading? JJ, are you okay with moving it out of committee for a first reading?
Yeah, but Chair Brim-Edwards, I had a question regarding, are we only talking about this specific section or like the entire policy?
Just that specific section. This is a conforming, we made significant changes to this policy last year or the year before. So it was just to that specific one. Do you have another question, or?
Yeah, I did have a question regarding, I think, some of like the diploma requirements and like some of the classes. Do you want me to just go into them right now, or?
Why don't you go ahead and, I don't want to have it necessarily an extended discussion, but why don't you
Yeah.
share what your questions are, and we'll decide whether we need to, if we have time to discuss them now or to move on. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So one of like the diploma requirements was like a personal financial education in the beginning of like the class of 2020. Yes, the beginning of a certain class. And I know currently some schools already kind of have like a financial literacy class. So I was kind of wondering like what would be the difference between like the personal financial education and the financial literacy classes some schools already have.
JJ, that's a great question, and if there's an opportunity in the near future, within the next month, we can share more broadly what the implementation plan will be for meeting this new graduation requirement, or what the proposed plan would be. In short, the state, Oregon Department of Education, has communicated very clearly that these new graduation requirements, personal finance and higher education career pathway, need to be standalone courses that students complete. The only exception that they have suggested thus far is that CTE courses in finance can qualify for this personal financial education requirement, and have provided us with information around how to crosswalk these two courses or this CT course and this new graduation requirement. But we can talk more about that at a later time.
Thank you.
There is one additional change to the diploma policy. If you look above,
What section number?
section 3, also, thank you, 3A5, a clause added that no more than 6 of those credits being earned in a self-contained classroom, that's talking about the 12 credits necessary for, and that too came out of the legislative changes that were made. So,
What did it
For the-
say, what did it say before? Or this whole section number 5
It
is
just
new?
said, earn the following 12 credits between grade 9 through the completion of high school, was the previous language. There's now the additional expectation that no more than 6 of those credits would be earned in a self-contained classroom.
And again, that's
to
a
get-
conforming,
That's conforming with legislative language, and that's for the purpose of an extended diploma requirement.
That's where I wanted to know where it was.
Yeah.
I have a question about language requirement. And it isn't clear to me what happens if your native language, say, is Spanish. Does that count if you also become fluent in English? Then
Yes.
is that a language credit?
That was a legislative fix
We
two
did-
sessions
we did
ago.
that.
We addressed this, and
Yes.
Because it's
yes.
not very clear to me when I was reading this about language credit. And proficiency credit and how you determine that.
It's under, if you look under section, well,
we had a long conversation about that in committee a couple of years
if you
ago.
look under the requirements, there's a proficiency, at the top of the, in section 1,
Mhm.
A, sub 2, and
Yeah.
then under B is proficiency credit.
See right here.
Sub 2 talks about world language credit may be awarded for a language course that teaches a language other than the student's primary language. World language definition is based on the individual student's linguistic background and the standards contents covered of the course. And then section B talks about the proficiency credit.
So what that means is if the student's primary language is, say, Spanish, that, they get credit for that?
I'm sorry.
If the student's first language is Spanish, they get credit for that as their language credit?
I know there's a process. I'm gonna let the educators speak to that.
And
I'm
I'm-
so
Okay.
out of my depths.
I'm also going to ask if we could have this be the last question, but whether the questions are dependent on whether we're willing to move it out.
Yeah, I just
Committee?
want it to be clear so people know what happens, because I am not clear at all about what would happen reading that.
So this is regarding access to linguistic inclusion, and I can share with you that in our course catalog, high school course catalog, when students are taking English language development, intermediate, or if they're taking early intermediate, students can earn world language credit. In the past, when students were taking ELD courses, English language development courses, they were only able to earn elective credits.
Mm-hmm.
And that made it very hard for them to meet their graduation requirement, and it also, in a way, was framed as a deficit model rather
Mhm,
than
yeah.
honoring the fact that the students were already
Mhm.
speaking a second, had native language proficiency and were learning English as well. So students taking early ELD can earn world language. Students who are taking advanced ELD courses can also earn language arts credit. So they can earn the credit needed to fulfill those 4 language arts graduation requirements.
Okay, that's good.
Yes.
I just don't quite see how anybody would understand that by reading this policy, but that's okay. We can rewrite it.
we had a really extended conversation about this earlier in policy committee, because of the, looking at a home language as an asset, and then not also have, so you wouldn't have somebody who, say their home language was Spanish, having to take French to get a world language credit. So I think in practicality, how it's now working, I do think it's working.
Mhm.
While the language may be better. Here's what I'd say. Why don't we move it out of committee, and if there's something that you feel would better reflect it, that the, staff agrees with, we could amend it.
Yeah, and the other
Sounds
thing
good.
is, it's also written out in the student handbook, which is written a lot more clear than
More
this.
clear.
That's right.
I'm fine.
Okay, so we can move this out for first reading? All right. So the next item on our agenda is the cell phone policy. And we have had a number of discussions already throughout the summer on the cell phone policy. We have a number of our schools that are implementing, most of our schools have some sort of cell phone policy. We have some of our high schools and middle schools at this time implementing ways in which they can sort of enforce the restrictions. Since the last time that we had a discussion about this, we have a new draft available, and essentially we have how it's set up is, as you walk through the policy, we're trying to still keep it fairly high level, so the details, high school principals are so intimidating. How we have it laid out is still trying to keep it a fairly high level policy, knowing that the administrative directives will have a lot more detail, but sort of statement of our values, and then setting some high level sort of statement of values, and also setting some guardrails for schools. And I thought what we'd do today is sort of walk through, and then we have also a staff recommendation. And so what I'd like to do is sort of walk through this, maybe section by section. And looking at the time, I'm going to keep us moving along. We're not moving it out of committee this time. Get some feedback on directionally. Have our questions answered by the experts, and continue to move the policy forward. And I will say, since we last looked at it, there's some, I would say, some significant decision points that are laid out now for the committee. You have summoned a panel. Look at power.
I have summoned no one, but I am very pleased that these
are they to
really accomplished folks are here and
answer
experts.
questions, or
Yes, I think they're here to answer questions. I mean, I think just to cut to one of the threshold questions about the scope of the policy is whether it's a singular policy that applies to the full district, or whether there is discretion among schools to craft restrictions, practices, use tools in their discretion for their school community. And I think you'll see that in the very first of the policy choices that was kind of pulled out of this example we've been working from for the last several meetings. So I think these are the experts to talk about that question, which I think is a pretty significant threshold question.
and I guess I'm going to put a little bit finer, or add an additional point, which would be we set broad outlines. At what point does it then become school discretionary versus like, well, it's just the school gets to choose or the district chooses, versus there may be a framework, and then at a certain point it you know, on the various different provisions that schools, the decision whether like that's going to be a district policy or a school-based one. So that a little bit of a refinement. So we start at the top. So we now have a statement of values about why we're doing this, and I want to thank Director Wong for bringing this forward. We had a recently passed board resolution that spoke to students' mental health and well-being and creating environments in which students can be focused on academics and their student-to-teacher relationships and peer-to-peer relationships. So we start with a statement of values. That's new. The definition hasn't changed since last time about what a personal electronic device is, so it's much broader than just a cell phone. Include also watches and a variety of other things that electronically capable of sending and communicating information. And same thing with the general guidelines. Again, we have number 2 is starting with the statement that students are permitted to personally possess cell phones, tablets, pagers, watches on campus, provided they are sort of off and away. We have an add in for school designated place, or the place where it's not visible during normal school hours unless used for academic activities or otherwise permitted in this policy. So some of our very first policy choices here will be, I guess just this is a big one. Is it the school prohibiting them or the district prohibiting them? And so originally, I'll kick off with a point of view. Originally, and still, the focus of the policy had been that there'd be a district-wide policy so that we wouldn't have this variation from classroom to classroom and school to school, knowing that already schools have a whole host of restrictions and their own rules. So I'm interested in hearing why we changed that, and welcome either one of you to sort of frame up initial thoughts or ask questions of the team here.
Well, we started out by feeling ourselves in what we'd read, that it would be very important to get them out of the classroom. And then we had teachers come and ask, please, would you do a district-wide policy to support us so that we don't have to be our individual monitors, that we have something to say, hey, we have to do this. So that's where I am.
Yeah, I would love to hear from the people who came all this way to speak. My issue that I'm trying to always kind of keep centered is that the data is clear, right, and how it affects students. The experiences of teachers is clear, right? The classroom management before and after cell phones is night and day, completely different. I would like, one of the things is also we need to solve the problem. Now, would a policy fix it? Probably not. And the thing that I always want to stress is that it needs to be about support, because like for example, North Clackamas did not need a new policy to try out. I think they're trying out pouches, right? They just cited the policy of student mental health and bullying. That was the 2 policies that they were enforcing when going this route. We don't need a new policy, but if it takes a policy to give our school support, then I'm 100% in, if that makes sense. So I think that's kind of my position on that. One of the things that we have to be clear is that there's the benefits of a district-wide policy is, this is something that came out when I talked to Principal Wilson, if I can quote you, is that one of the fears that a lot of schools have is if they're left out on their own to do this on their own, right, without district support. I don't know if if any of you could help me, or just share your ideas of what would work in terms of the district being able to make it work for our schools.
Can I start?
If that's okay. Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, that's fine. I
Those are my
would
questions.
ask everybody, just look at the time and keep it concise.
Very concise. Okay, so Curtis Wilson Jr., principal of Benson Tech. So we have just implemented a new cell phone policy that started yesterday. And this was something that was brought to myself by my teachers. They're very adamant about making changes in our current cell phone policy that we've had for years, but have never followed through on. It just got buried because we're just so busy. So I put together a committee of 11 adults, and we met last part of June over the summer. We met with our student leaders, and we decided that we were going to revamp our cell phone policy. And so our whole focus is to just get the cell phones not out of the class, but not be a part of the class, because we know that that's a battle that's a little bit higher up on the pay grade for us right now. And so we have a great policy that I feel is meeting the students halfway. No cell phones once class starts. They can use it before school, passing time, lunch, and after school. But there's no cell phones in class. No cell phones are used at all for academic courses, period. If there's something that needs to be done where you need a cell phone, then we will have a meeting to talk about that. We, as a committee, decided that you can teach without the cell phones. You can. You just have to pivot and adapt to it. And so for us, I've been saturating it with our parents. I send it to our students. Our teachers, we spent a couple hours on it a few days ago during our PD. And this is going to be done tomorrow. So this is our cell phone policy that we met with the teachers and did. And this is the one that the teachers are going to present to our students tomorrow. And then our student leaders presented a PSA as well. I brought in the student body president. I brought in the senior class president. We walked them through it. And so they put together a skit that we're going to play tomorrow during sixth period for all of our students. And we felt that by moving back to the new Benson, that this was the time to make it happen, because that is a huge change for us, and we figured this is the time to strike now and make it happen.
Yeah, it was Benson teachers who came to us that really got us riled up.
They are fired up.
Yeah,
They're
so that was
fired
good.
up. And what I kept telling them, because they were really upset with me, was that I'm not going on an island by myself in doing this. I said, I will do this if I know that the district has my support in regards to Yonder, because they wanted Yonder. And I said, we're not going to Yonder. A, I don't have the resources, I can't afford it. And B, it is so intense right now with our students that if the district doesn't support me, then it's me going against 1,000 students and their families. And this way is much more proactive in that we're gonna slowly work with the students. The ones that don't want to be a part of it, they don't want to participate in it, we're going to have conversations with them. And I made it very clear to my team, no one will be disciplined in regards to a cell phone unless it comes through my office. We have so many layers that if it gets to me, then there's a serious issue. Mm-hmm. And we're going to try to support those kids who are adamant that they will not abide by these rules.
Because a lot of what we hear, or at least read, is you say no cell phones, or you can't use them, but kids, then you notice everybody's eyes are down because they've got their cell phones in their laps. So I'm going to be really interested to see if this is going to work for you. Yeah.
Anyone else?
We at Roosevelt, we started last year with our site council and our climate team. We had teachers also saying we've got to get cell phones out of the classroom. We started with a policy that said that you could use cell phones for academic purposes. And in talking with other schools who had that in their policy, we removed it before we rolled it out, because then it becomes this, well, what's academic and what isn't academic? And it becomes that conversation. So we went completely, almost word for word what Curtis said. So off and away during class time, I have a pouch in my bag. I forgot to bring it up here. Little pouches that they're just little envelopes that are on every single desk, so a kid can slide it in there, because we talked a lot about this device is expensive, and a lot of students, it's a really important thing that they own, and so we wanted to make sure to have it physically close to them if they did need a little more structure and support to not be on their device. We rolled it out today. I was in 4 classrooms. I think I saw 1 phone, which that was not what it was last year. So we've gone off and away. I had this conversation with a bunch of high school students last night in my own home, because one of them goes to Grant and has already figured out how to get into the Yonder Pouch. I've always said kids are smarter than us. So I think it's really about, for me, I know our teachers really felt it was important for us as a school to have a policy so they could enforce the policy and not be the person creating and enforcing the policy. I think as a building leader, it's nice to have the district have a policy so I can be the person enforcing the policy that someone else has told me to enforce. So to me, I would appreciate a district policy, because I think it allows us a little more leverage to work with kids as they figure out how to move through the world, not on a screen constantly.
You
want to say something?
Do you?
Where's this word?
So I think it's interesting that I feel like we're kind of gradating down this way. So Elise Huggins, Vice Principal of Reconnection Services, closely tied to Alliance High School. We too, like Curtis, just moved into a beautiful new building. The policy that Alliance High School is implementing this year is very much teacher discretion. So it's red card or green card, and teachers have to show a red card or green card in their room, and it's up to them. Our community is very divided over a cell phone, Yonder Pouches, or a cell phone ban. We serve students, many of whom are 20 and 21 years old. Our parents have jobs and are independent and living alone. And so there's a tension there around restricting cell phones for adults and what that feels like. The culture in in our building for these students is very independent. And there is a commitment to wanting to teach students how to manage their cell phones, not just take them away from them, but help them build the skills that allows them to manage them in life and beyond. So, so that's what we're rolling out at Alliance High School. And I think there's a strong feeling of some staff that one size does not fit all. And I think this is a theme that will resonate when you have anyone from our alternative settings coming forward. Alternative means something different, and we need some, I think, flexibility to be able to design something that makes sense for those communities. So I think, I think that's the gist of it over to Alliance right now.
Thank you. Good evening, Kristen McCloskey, Senior Director of Schools. I just want to thank all of our district leaders and school leaders for being here tonight. And I think that what we heard from both tonight and from the last meeting that we had, where we had Principal Vimignon and Principal McGee come to talk to the policy committee, is that there's a significant level of community engagement that has happened. And although each one of these schools has a different approach as to how they are approaching supporting teachers and students with devices, they are different approaches, and it did require a lot of engaging of the teachers and of the students and of the parents. And so I think the appreciation of supporting schools with what's going to work best for them, I think is going to be helpful, because each one of them, I believe, is approaching it in the way that will work best for their communities.
So I think some of the ambiguity that's been part of the discussion is what a district there appears to be a district policy coming. But what is the flexibility within the policy? How uniform is it? How much discretion does it give to different schools, and why? And I think that's where I'm hearing the texture across.
So just in response, I think what I'd want to say is I think we should develop, as we do on several other things, a separate policy for all our alternative programs. It's just a different, I mean, they don't go often different school hours. It's a whole different set of things. So I would just say, just generally, I don't know exactly what it is, but I think there's a different category that we should consider versus the high schools and principals. And do you have a point of view on that, or?
Yeah, I mean, if you only allow cell phones in alternative schools, you might be boosting their enrollment. All kidding aside, Principal Wilson, I thought sounded like you had a comment you want to make?
Well, yeah, I was going to say that we've had the off and away for years. Posters are all over the building, right? They're everywhere. It's in our Benson Tech Policy Compact Handbook, and when we put together the cell phone committee, and I was very specific about who was going to be on that committee because I wanted to hear from all sorts of people. So we had SPED teachers on there, we had true, anti-cell phone teachers on there. We had teachers that were like, well, we need to really work hard to support our kids because they need their phones. I wanted to hear those views as well, and so then we went back and forth and back and forth. But one of the things that we did land on was that we've always had a policy at Benson. We've just never enforced it. We just never enforced it. I mean, I dug it up, I looked at it, I compared that to what we're doing right now, and it's almost word for word. So we just kind of dusted it off, and what I needed my staff to know was that administration is going to support you now. It's now at the top of what we're doing. Kind of like everything that's kind of happening, it kind of just lit that fire. But so many other things just pushes the cell phones down because we just allowed our teachers to figure it out themselves on their own, class per class. So my staff feels good that they don't have to have a power struggle with students now. They're going to send them to us, or we're going to come get them, and my office will now have those conversations. They can just keep teaching. So if we go with the district policy, for me as the principal, it's about when I have that student or parent that's going to push back pretty hard, and they're going to go above me in regards to the policy, that I have the support as well. Because I have no problem dictating our policies, but our parents are very good about, okay, well, everyone has a boss, and we now want to go to the next level. And if it's in writing, then I can feel very good about what we're doing. Right now, we don't have it, and so it usually just stops in my office.
So, based on presentation, I'm going to summarize and then also take from my visit to Franklin and Cleveland yesterday and this morning, and conversations there, is the commonality, and this is again putting the alternative programs in with a different set of rules, but the commonality is off and away, right? And so Cleveland has Yonder pouches, Franklin has the wall pouches. I guess you have envelopes, you have.
We have the wall pouches and the
envelopes. Okay, so sort of like Franklin.
Yeah, so
so there are some commonalities that we could shape, and then it would have, sorry. Oh my God, how untimely.
I'm sorry.
Off and away. Usually it's like, it's my 93-year-old mom
This
calling me.
is what distraction does to you.
She's up from her nap, calling me back.
We're off topic.
So I see some commonalities, and maybe and it could be enforced different ways. So to me, I still see could be the value in the high level, like what are the commonalities, and then where is there divergent because of how schools operate. I'm a little bit surprised about, and maybe this goes into the next piece, the no use for academics, and that kind of surprises me because that seems like sort of a given. So
what? You mean a given that?
Oh, given that like there would be instances in which teachers would say they should be able to use their phone for academics.
The Chromebooks came up a lot when we were having this conversation, when People on the cell phone committee at Benson were pushing back about not having cell phones being used for academic purposes. So every argument that came up, we were able to solve it with either laptops, Chromebooks, and in the end, we felt good that they could still learn by using their Chromebooks or their laptops and not their cell phones.
Yeah, I was at Lincoln this morning, and they were short on Chromebooks, and their schedules, everybody's schedules was on their Chromebook. So some had their phones. They don't have a phone policy yet to find their schedule. So I realized, whoa, and I'm way for getting rid of phones, but that we really have to have our technology there in the building.
And that was the great thing today is a lot of our students, first day, everyone's there now, all 9 through 12. And as they're trying to find their classes, because it's between classes, they all had their cell phones out. And they're looking for their classes through Student View. We had no problem with that. And once they got into their classrooms, they put their cell phones away.
Yep. Yeah, one quick thing thanks for the input, that's really helpful, because one of the things that I think is important is to make sure that the policy is open enough to allow for creative solutions. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, and I'm not trying to promote Yonder, but the thing about Yonder that is good, right, that we see, right, is that the problem, right, we should be solving for problems, right? So, like, the problem is the burden of enforcement of cell phones off and away has been on the teachers. And that just has shown I mean, we've been doing this for 10 years or more, and it's just not working. It's a huge stressor, right? And the problem it solved is that it moved the point of enforcement from the classroom to the front door, right? When they walk in, they put it in, they lock it up, and now the enforcement aspect is no longer in the classroom. And I think that solves a problem. Now, is that the best way? Probably not. I mean, we're humans. We come up with cool, creative ways. And maybe 2 years from now, there's going to be another, like, solution that's even better, right? And so I think it's important that we have a policy that, A, gives our schools support so that the principals are not left alone to deal with this on their own. But B, is open enough that when new solutions come about, it's easy to adopt, whether that's in the AD or by school, right? But they do need support, and I think that's where I think I want to kind of channel what Director Scott said in the last meeting. It's like, maybe the better way was to compartmentalize and solve for specific problems. Like, for example, alternative ed has different issues that needs a different set of rules, right? And our general ed high schools have a whole different, it's a whole different ballgame. Our middle schools is a different thing as well. So perhaps we just need to solve for things, and how, I think the discussion just needs to be on what kind of supports that people need and how to best solve that problem directly, right? So I think in terms of this huge, I think this new policy here that we have, the red line version, is completely different, right? The question now is what problems is this one solving for, and is it the right way to go?
Can I just ask one? Well, because I fear what's going to happen is we're going to go back and be asked to redraft, and I'm looking for their voices to help us bridge what you're asking while they're here, and you are talking to each other. When you say you want a policy, it would help you to have it in writing. What do you need that policy to say in terms of a district statement versus discretion at a school level versus not say, perhaps? And just to kind of get to follow up on what you said, Curtis.
That's a good question.
So I'll speak a little bit to the academic activities, because I said something about that. So an example of a disagreement on what an academic activity is. So we have teachers who, especially after the pandemic, have given kids brain breaks. And so I'll be sitting in a classroom, they'll give a 5 or 10 minute brain break, and kids are completely silent, not talking to each other, all on their phones. Mental health wise, I don't think that's the best thing, but I think that a teacher or a parent could argue that 10-minute brain break is really important for their mental health, right? So I think that as you're starting to look at what do we consider an academic activity? I mean, when I think of academic activity, you're doing a Kahoot, you're using the QR code, you're doing you're checking for understanding by doing some sort of quiz they're using their phone for, but they can do all of that on their Chromebook, which they should be bringing to class every day. So I think that when we get squishy, that's where it gets hard and up for interpretation. And so that was the feedback I got from my colleagues. I went to the middle schools who had already had cell phone policies in place and asked them what was in their policy. And they are the ones that said they took the using the phone for academic activities out, because that's where the rub came, right? So if I'm struggling with enforcing the policy, I can say, oh, this is for academic purposes, right? As opposed to just a hard and fast, we just don't have phones on in class. We called it tech away, tech okay, and it was a green sign and a red sign, and those sat up with tech away on people's front boards and kids were on their phones. So I think like what's the consistency? I think that's the part that for me as a leader would be helpful. Not squishy.
Are you doing education about why we want, you're telling parents and
Yeah,
kids
so
why?
our lessons today for students, and we'll do them again tomorrow, are about why we're doing this, the feedback we got. I mean, we talk to kids don't want to give up their phones, and they know they need to give up their phones, right? So we talked a lot about mental health. We purchased the movie Screenagers, which is a documentary. It's going to be one of the ways that we do some tier 2 and tier 3 instruction on the cell phone policy and how cell phones impact your mental health. So there's some other pieces that we're doing, because I also think it's an education piece right now. I think a lot has shifted in our beliefs about cell phones since the pandemic. And my friend's husband says that it's going to be like smoking in 20 years. We're going to look back and be like, why in the world do we let these kids on their phones all day? So I think there's a lot of education, and I think kids know it. But I think then there's also the students that do need some of these things to help them. I mean, we have a kid who's diabetic, and he has to access his phone, right? So like. There are places where it makes sense to make exceptions, and that's what we do all day long, right? We make exceptions.
Okay, so I'm just going to summarize what I've heard so far, that it would be helpful to at least have a high-level district policy that supports schools, and that we probably need to have something different for all alternative programs. So, and we would welcome thoughts on the alternative programs, what that might look like. It seems like the way that things are worded, that the one thing that, say, B would be in conflict, for example, with what's happening at Benson, is that during passing time, students can use, and lunchtime can use, during passing time, which this says only before or after school and lunchtime. So that would be stricter than what you have.
And the same at Roosevelt. We basically have the same policy.
Okay. And Cleveland is no lunchtime or anything, because they have like yonder pouches and they're not going to open them all up at lunchtime. But similar to Franklin. So what I'm trying to do is I find where's the sort of the floor, set the floor, and then with based on a theory of schools could set something stricter, but that there's a floor that you all could operate under, that like it's the same at this school as it is at that school, and the sort of the most basic floor is off and away during the class. During class time. I think we're at a separate time. I think we need to do, maybe this is getting more insights from the academic side, is a little bit deeper dive on the academic piece. And actually, because we're not going to implement something right away, we're going to be able to hear back from you about whether that actually works, or like, hey, it turns out in art it's really useful because they don't have their Chromebooks out, and sometimes students might want to use it. So maybe we'll hear more from you on that academic piece. I want to keep going on these, and I want to talk a little bit about 2C, which is the videos. Originally, and just for everybody's purposes, while this is redlined and changed, it's not changed until the committee decides it's changed. Originally, there was no videos shall be taken during school hours unless the direction of adult for educational purposes. The policy now says, or a recommendation from staff is no videos or photos of any kind on school grounds using personal cell phones or electronic devices if such videos or photos are used to harass or bully another student or violates PPS student anti-harassment and teen violence policy. And since we have some experts here, do you have thoughts on these? Because I can see some other examples where that we would want to add here if we went to a much narrow, I mean, this is a very significant narrowing, but I could see, like, you know, some students don't want to be photographed in a video, then that doesn't take this into account here. It's just saying, like, if you photograph them and then use it to harass them or bully them, you can't do it, but some people don't want for a variety of reasons, their photo to be taken. So that would be one thing. And then, and maybe I've got a question for staff. If somebody takes a video or a photo of somebody and uses it to mock that student with other students, but doesn't actually share it within, is that, or maybe they don't even know about it, is that, say the individual doesn't even know that it's happening, is it bullying if you don't know it's happening?
We would still consider it bullying, yes. And we
I
would
mean,
take
it seems obvious, but it also, so.
Right, and we've had those things occur, you know, where they set up, it's hard to identify the student, but they set up separate accounts and will just make fun of other students.
Yeah, why don't we say they can't take photos? I mean.
Yeah, so maybe we can.
I just want to remind us where this is not the usual path to policy drafting that this started as an example when we were asked to bring examples to the committee, and then we've edited on top of the example document, and that's why we tried to pull out the policy decisions. So there is nothing here that's trying to usurp the policymaking authority of the board, and it's been an unusual process. And Julie and I have had this conversation. We disagree about how well it worked. I think it's made it harder. I'll help do it a different way next time. But we do want, these are the exact kind of discussions to figure out what is the policy direction the board wants, and with feedback from the informed leaders in school buildings, and so we can help draft the language to meet that.
That would be, Katie and I were just talking about it. So when school was out today, a lot of students were in the main hallway, and they were excited about being at Benson, and they all gathered, and they were all doing their thing, and then someone said it there, and then they're all doing their dance, and I just kind of, it was exciting and great, and they were, same thing at lunch, they were with all their friends, they were all excited, they were all taking group photos. So to say that they couldn't take photos or videos would be, especially if we're allowing them to use their cell phones before lunch and after school, it'd be very difficult to enforce that because, like, example for us, when we had all 1,000 kids come down for lunch, it was just like a concert, right? And kids were everywhere, and that would be logistically impossible to enforce for us with the 5 people that were in the cafeteria with 1,000 kids. And they were all excited to see each other, and phones were everywhere.
And we don't need that addition. I mean, it's referencing two other policies that we already have in place. And we have, in the past, when people have created videos or taken photos to harass or bully, the schools have taken action, even without this specific language in place. It's just because those other policies talk directly about the action of bullying or harassing.
So my question about that is also just, I mean, when the bare minimum being like not allowed to take any photos or video of any kind that's going to be posted online or a public forum, because Yeah, I mean, I just think of analogies, like, for example, we already have rules that prevent random strangers coming into our schools and taking pictures for our students, right? I mean, then, it's a fuzzy line between students taking pictures and then posting it on Instagram. I mean, it's practically kind of the same thing. So I think the point is, like, where do we draw that line that A, is enforceable, but it's also, still needs to follow our rules and protecting our students, right?
I think we're going to have to get some really specific guidance on how to enforce that, because there could be people consenting to a picture and four in the back not knowing their photos taken. That the administration would have the ability to investigate individual phones or personal social media sites. Katie's shaking her head. I mean, just to think realistically about how you would enforce that and what the guidelines would be. I think we would need some input from people on the ground about what's achievable.
I'm just thinking about sporting events, right? Sporting events, theater events, these things that are happening, because if you're talking about on school grounds, kids at the basketball game taking pictures and that type of thing, I think this would be a really, I mean, I know that we have definitely done discipline for students who have then used things in a harassing or bullying way. So Mary, I agree with you. This kind of references something else that we're already doing, so I don't know if this is needed.
I wonder if it could be, instead of a hard and fast rule, but to just state that not everybody wants their picture taken and distributed on social media. I mean, and sometimes it's very culturally specific, so I'm wondering if instead of just saying no doing it, but like just making a statement of values that we.
And I think that's where education comes in, right? How are we teaching kids to be good stewards of technology and social media, and how are we teaching them to use it responsibly? Like, that to me is the kind of the other side of this coin, right? Is that we need a policy, but we also need to educate students on how do you use these things, being a good citizen of our community.
Yeah, and when we do our investigations, we've been doing this a long time, it's pretty obvious to us what the intent was in regards to whatever meme or languages attached to the picture. And if the language is in there about cyberbullying, harassment, et cetera, we're able to tie those two together. As compared to, I took a selfie with my friends, they were in the background, they didn't want to be a part of it, they're now saying that they're being bullied. Okay, then we'll look into it and we'll see if we can corroborate that.
Well, we really want to hear how you two are doing. It's going to make a big difference. I'm excited about it. So the things you have on the desk are just little
just a pouch. Yeah.
pouches, and
It's
they
like
put
a
it in
pencil.
for each class.
Yep.
Here's a pencil. Ours is
Yeah,
a little
pencil pouch.
envelope, like a mailing envelope,
Yeah.
with the plastic bubble wrap, and it has a little meme that's like, your cell phone needs a nap. Put it in a sleeping bag. We call them sleeping bags. We got it from McDaniel. Everything good we get from McDaniel High School.
Yeah, and we counted yesterday with our 313 freshmen that showed up. When we had them on the learning walk, we purposely were looking for cell phones, because as freshmen, it shouldn't even be an issue, and we only counted one. There was one student that we had a conversation with out of the 300 that were sitting up there that was on their cell phone in the morning when we were going over everything and taking our class picture. And so we were very happy about that. So the freshmen got it.
Once they learn how happy they can be without it, we might not have to talk about it so much. Okay, thank you so much.
I'm going to be really cognizant of the time here. So I'm going to summarize on this piece that what I heard is that these two policies may be enough, and if you had a policy of a student being able to use before or after lunchtime, it'd be very difficult to enforce that no photo and videography. Okay, and then my only other question is, like, where do, like, this whole thing about doing videos of fights, where would this be in here?
That's in our student code of conduct too, specifically. It's I think a major technology violation.
That's
I
a
wanna
major
say.
technology
Yeah.
violation, yes. So that is currently a practice.
So we could just add, or the student code of conduct, because you reference policies. Okay. So we have a number of other provisions that we didn't yet get to, although I think we got to some of the major ones. Maybe to expedite and also to not have the, super appreciate all the feedback here. But I guess one of the things that might be useful is just to ask the schools what how they would, at least the high schools, because I think that's where that's sort of the focus should be right now. Whether this language, the revised language on if a device is found, the thinking of the high schools and the workability, because I know there's already a lot of conversations happening. So it may be useful to hear. I'm on E.
Are you talking about E? So
Yeah.
I hesitate to ask about specific language when the language came from just a discussion document and the policy decision you're proposing hasn't been nailed down. And so this language is just, I want to make sure we're asking what you are contemplating, not necessarily what happened in the LAUSD policy. That was the starting point.
JJ, yes.
Oh, JJ?
Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
wondering if staff could share with me all of like the PPS high schools phone policies.
I'm looking at Chief Franco. Do you have policies for each high school as it relates to cell phones? Okay, thank you.
So that would be useful. So I'm just looking at the other policy choices, but like what to do if students are found seems like less of a conversation with students, but more a sort of administrator and staff discussion about how that would work. So I'm concerned about in a policy us saying how it might work. Do you think you need in the policy direction of what happens if a student violates the policy?
Is that normally in a policy?
If they violate it and they continue to use it, this whole like confiscating the phone.
Yeah. I mean, we have a way that we're dealing with it, and we did put it in our policy just to be transparent. And part of the reason that we wanted to be really clear on how we're collecting cell phones or not collecting cell phones is so that we can track, because we want them to enter in a stage 1 office referral, so that we can track it and see if is Curtis on his phone every single period and every single teacher is taking it from him for the period, but we're not seeing that across the day unless we track it centrally. And so our policy is you get a couple warnings. I mean, it's clear how many warnings you get, and then the teacher takes it for the rest of the period. And if the student refuses, then we take it at the office level for the day. And then I think then we go into, it's every day that this is happening. We've got to have a different intervention. So I don't know that needs to be in the policy, because I think also it's just like the student, can it refer back to the Students' Rights and Responsibilities Handbook? Because that's where we go when we deal with discipline, right? So does it refer back to that? And then we need to add some things into there as to what it's going to look like.
That would be, and I think we talked about this at the last policy committee, that would be insubordination, and it's a tiered, it's already in the student conduct matrix, kind of a tiered response.
That's what we're saying, it's insubordination.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's not specific to cell phones, though.
No, there are a number of, insubordination is a broad category.
Insubordination and defiance.
Yeah, and we're in the same boat in that we have a lot of proactive measures so that we're trying to reteach the students how to utilize their cell phones. So same thing, first warning, we drop the pouch, put it in your phone, put your phone in the pouch, you leave it next to you, keep teaching. You pull your phone out, second time teacher gets it, gets the pouch to us, and each room in Benson has a locking file cabinet where they can store the phone. Sometime throughout the day, the phone comes to us. we call the student down, we have a conversation, student gets the phone back at the end of the day, but we have the conversation. But we also are tracking it now. We have a tracking system as well, spreadsheet. And if it happens a second time, student comes down, we have the phone, and now we're calling the parents. Because now the parents need to be involved with this, because now we're having the parents come get the phone. And we know a lot of parents do not want to come up to the school to pick up a phone. So we're hoping that that will be like a real proactive way to curb this in regards to the phones. But at the same time, we're having these conversations with the students each time. I feel very good that the conversations will work with our students. I don't see me going to a level where a student is going home over a cell phone. It's really just being proactive and having the discussions with the kids. And so it will fall under insubordination, which is in the Student Rights and Responsibilities Handbook, but we will also do a lot of proactive measures before we get anywhere near there.
So maybe keeping it high level and letting that be the different ways in which you approach it and the escalation be school defined?
Yeah. We had one student write me and tell me that I'll get his phone from his cold, dead hands, right? And I just said, okay, I would love to sit down and have a conversation with you about that, right? Let's just talk this through, right? Before we go there. He's already on the extreme, and I'm still here, so we're gonna have a conversation.
JJ?
Yeah, my question to the principals here is, what do your student leaders think about the phone policies at their schools?
What do your who?
Student leaders. Student leaders.
That's a great question. So I knew and this is Curtis Wilson from Benson Tech, I knew that if I don't have my student leaders on board, then it's us against them mentality. So I brought them in June, my incoming student body president, my incoming senior class president, and then some ASB leaders. And I explained to them what we were about to do, and I wanted to get their input. And once I explained the why, we have a big why, mental health, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Gave them some data, research, and they were like, we agree. And I was like, okay, now we're gonna need your help. So they were the ones that came in August, met with us. We rehashed everything again, and then they announced it to the seniors yesterday when the seniors showed up. We didn't, as admin, now we wanted the students to do it. So the students did it, we were standing next to them, but our vice principal talked about it, our senior leaders talked about it, and now tomorrow the entire school will see the video that was put in place by our student leaders about our new cell phone policy. And it's just a skit, it's a 2-minute skit about, they're just acting what would happen and why we're doing this, and they're giving, which is important, they're giving the why, which is what we wanted to have happen.
Yeah, and this is Katie Parman from Roosevelt. Very similar. So we talked with student leaders, we talked with our peer mediators, we talked with some different students. We also really wanted to hear from lots of different families. So, our site council is predominantly white. Our school is not predominantly white. So we went out to our Latino family nights. We went to our Pacific Islander nights, our African family nights. And there were some differences in what families felt they needed as far as access to their students during the day, which is why we decided not to go cell phone free all day long, that there are times that kids do need access to their phone to communicate with family, to do the things that they need to do. So we wanted to make sure that there was a little flexibility while also keeping class time cell phone free. And students, like I said, they weren't psyched about it, but they also understood the why once we really talked about what it was and why we felt like we needed to do it.
And this is Lise from Alliance High School largely. So we're in an interesting situation where we have two campuses, separate campuses that are coming together into one building. And so you had a policy at one campus and you didn't have a policy at another campus. And so we're, I think, maybe a year or whatever behind folks in just trying to lay a policy down and follow through with it with the green and red cards, and bring the staff together and gather some data and some student input. And so I think we're probably a few steps behind some of the comprehensive high schools, and also just dealing with the work that comes with bringing two faculty together under one roof. So that's where we're at in terms of student input, JJ.
Great. I'm looking at the hour, so I'm going to say we've got the topic wrapped up for now. We're going to, we'll come back with another set of revisions, and I really appreciate you bringing your expertise and your insights from your schools. And I think, given we have time, and just as a reminder, everybody, Dr. Adams is going to be working with student leaders in this committee on a student survey, so we'll have additional information. He's also going to do some focus groups with the schools that have enforcement mechanisms. So we'll have plenty of data, and that I think is targeted for October 15th thereabouts, to get that data back on the students, and we'll incorporate that in. I think we're going to actually have a better policy by going slow to go fast, without sort of like, we got to get a policy in place, and then, you know, trying to figure out all the things that we need to change because we hadn't thought about it beforehand. So really appreciate you sharing at least your initial experiences, because I think it'll help us create a better policy. And JJ, thanks for bringing student voice, and hopefully that will also be amplified as we move ahead. So with that, I'm going to turn, I just want one other item. We have 2 policies out right now for thank you very much. You know,
let us know how it's going.
Sure.
Yeah. We want to know all about the learnings that you secured.
Thank you.
It was a really rich conversation. Thanks for arranging that. So we have 2 policies out for first readings. And I want to note that one of the policies that we had a first reading on field trips, foreign travel, and other off-campus activities, there was a discussion at the board. We had the first reading about this policy, and there is staff had a recommendation that was, I would say, more restrictive than the first reading, and there is an interest by some individuals on the board who are not committee members of advancing an amendment that would incorporate the staff recommendation, which is a 5-day with a +2 days for travel that is extensive. And that has been posted. And I want to flag it in committee, because generally our practice has been to not be amending policies on the day that we're approving them at the full board level. So what I'd like to do is send out a version of the policy or the specific amendment to the full board, and at the next board meeting, just flag that for the other board members, so that we can hopefully have a discussion here in the committee, but with more of the board members as part of that discussion.
How about whether to accept or to put in
so that
staff report?
Right. I mean, listening to the discussion the other night, I heard, and then afterwards, a desire from some non-committee members to amend it, and generally I think it's bad policy to have like the second reading and then have it amended, and then if we amended it, we'd then have we need to have another first reading, we should, and then another 21 days. So what I would like to do is ask to bring it back to have a board discussion, to just get a sense of the board. And so, because I do feel like if there is a desire to change it, we should give people an opportunity to comment on the change.
But we won't vote on it next time.
But I think the issue I have with that I got two big issues, is that, you know, this has been worked on for months and months and months. So like, you know, when do we pull the plug and just say, hey, you had your chance, right? And then the other thing is that, you know, in terms of governance, so like, the thing the thing about management, right, and this is the biggest qualm I have, is that the whole purpose of this policy was kind of fixing something that is endangering a program. You know, for example, I mean, I'll just back up a little bit. So you know, this is oversimplifying, but you know, two styles of management, right? One is like, you know, there's a concern happening, right? And these trips are happening, and so, okay, well, you know, you need 10 days, but let's work on that and try to figure out, you know, here's some problems. We're worried about students left behind, so let's solve that problem. And then, you know, we work with the groups to try to reduce their amount of days over. And then there's the other style of kind of management, which is saying like, oh, here's a problem. You got 5, you know, now it's 5 days cap, work with it. And so that, you know, that's more of an authoritarian type of thing. And the problem with that style is that it doesn't take into account the effects that has on these programs, right? So for example, it's not collaborative at all, right? And so if we're going to amend it and say, hey, okay, let's go with staff recommendation, which is let's keep it at 5 days with 2 additional days for extended travel, it still is kind of like saying, this is the limit, you figure out how to work with it. And the thing is, the feedback we've been getting is, you know, threefold. One is that this makes it very difficult for this program to continue. I mean, let's just be straightforward and honest. This is a program that has been created and maintained by the Asian communities for over, you know, for multiple decades. And to have suddenly a AD come in and limit to 5 days, we are now threatening the continuation, the existence of these programs. So I just want to be very clear, because in order to keep these things going, these groups have very outright said that the current limits they have right now is unsustainable, and that's been very clear. So I guess my point is that if we're going to start limiting days, right, then, you know, that's I guess that's my beef right there, is that these kind of things shouldn't be, you know, obviously we're working backwards, right? We're saying, oh, these are the days you have, and then go figure it out. Instead of the other way around, which is, let's work with these groups and figure out what's the maximum or what's the minimum amount of days they need, and then let's work with them to try to figure out a calendar where they can, you know, reduce the amount of days they're gone, right? And then it's a collaborative thing. So I guess that's my beef. It's like going with another further limiting it again is a wrong way to go about it. The reason I pushed this policy to do 10 days is kind of because the AD wasn't changing, right? And then it's also puts in wording that says, you know, these groups will work to try to minimize the days that they're gone. That doesn't mean they have to take 10 days of school days. They can, maybe there's some years they can reduce it to 8 or 7. But it gives them that option instead of a hard, fast rule where if they can't meet it, you know, then the program goes insolvent. So I think again, I'm not in this committee anymore, so this is up to you. But that's my big beef with it. I would not prefer the amendment route.
Yeah. As somebody who just spent 6 years on a policy or more, I feel your pain. I also would say that, so there's a risk of, like, you've had your chance in that ultimately the policy could just be rejected by the board. And I guess then you have the existing policy and AD that exist. And you, I feel very strongly that, say if it comes to the full board and the amendment gets offered, which I expect it would, to me, it's a substantive change and would require another 21 days. So and I think that's important because I think actually if it would change from what the committee originally recommended to the staff recommendation, that we'd want the community to be able to comment versus just voting for it, like, we're gonna amend it, and now we're gonna adopt the policy. So I guess one of the things I'm trying to consolidate the timeline, because if you don't consolidate the timeline, then we wait till we're at the 21 days, we bring it to the board, somebody offers the amendment that we, know that is gonna be offered, and if it gets adopted, then you have another 21 days, so it takes longer. So in some ways, I'm trying to also respect the committee process, but also, which is where the majority of the work should happen, but also recognizing that the full board will vote on it, and it could be amended.
So you're suggesting we accept the amendment, and then we have to go 21 days, and then either to accept or not the amendment?
I'm suggesting that at the next board meeting, we have an agenda item. We get a sense of whether there's support for the amendment. If there is, I would say that we should adopt it in and post that for 21 days so that community members can share their point of view on the amendment. And if at the next meeting, if there's not a majority that wants to include the amendment, then we move ahead with the second reading.
So, but
Right after the amendment was, if it's not accepted.
Well, I don't think we're done with the 21 days by the next meeting, the 10th.
Yes, we would be.
We would be.
So, I mean, the alternative would be,
But we can't say there's like no amendments.
right, so that's option one. So option two would be we go forth as planned. And if someone proposes an amendment, and let's say it passes, then because it's such a significant change, it would have to go back, right?
Yeah,
And then, but if it doesn't pass, then we can vote on the policy right
Then
there.
we could vote on the policy right then.
Right, so
We could.
I guess
We'd
I'm
rather-
failing to see what the advantage is of,
Well, I guess I'm
The
flagging that, I think, I heard a majority of the board express some concern, so I'm trying to, as we discussed, sort of condense the timeline. And the policy says that whether it's a material change is to the discretion of the board gets to decide that. I mean, I would say it absolutely is a material change, but again, it's a sense of we could as a committee, Patty and I could say, we would also share that we think it's a material change. Like, the committee would feel that sort of change is a material change and should go out for another first reading, and again, then it's up to the rest of the board to whether they agree with that or not. There's only been one time in 7 years that it was a material change and they just went ahead anyway. And they said it wasn't a material change, we're just gonna adopt the policy.
Well, I'm thinking of the best way to get it passed the way it is, so, and that sounds kind of scary.
Well, I think it's that, making the case to the board. I mean, we were all present for the discussion. There were a number of questions raised, so.
Yeah. So if somebody brings up the amendment, we have to vote on whether to put the amendment in or not.
Yep. And then, assuming the board agrees that it's a substantial adjustment, then we'd have put out for another 21 days of comment.
I guess my question is, what's the advantage of doing the first way you proposed? Besides just getting a read of of the board?
Sometimes it's good to know where the chess pieces are, I guess.
And we can't, and since somebody has requested an amendment, we can't ignore that. We have to do
Well,
something.
I mean, every board member has a right to offer an amendment.
Right.
I guess the concern I have about that is the potential delay it could cause because, you know, school in Taiwan has started, has started in Japan, and they need time to figure out when they're doing their residencies. And if we're delaying it for, months, I mean, that could be devastating. I'm just saying that I think in terms of timeline, I think we need to figure out what is fair to these programs and our teachers.
We generally have a 21-day comment period, if it's amended. I do think it's a possibility you could ask for the waiving of a 21-day comment period and have a 10-day comment period since we've already had a 21-day. There's some flexibility, but this is why we need to have our first and second readings at all our meetings, just because it slows the process down if we don't do it. I mean, obviously, if the amendment's not accepted, you have a second reading and then it's done. But if it's amended, then unless you don't want to have an additional public comment period.
I mean, it's up to you two, but I think I still prefer going with the original plan as
Just
is.
have a straight vote.
Yeah, just a vote. Well, I mean, if someone offers
Well,
an
if somebody
amendment,
will
that's up
offer
to
an
them.
amendment.
But,
Okay.
if the amendment votes down, then we go up with a straight vote. If it votes up, then we would have to go back to first, second reading.
Okay.
I mean, that,
I'm fine
again,
with
that's
that.
your decision.
I do,
'cause I'm
I
not-
also, I guess the other value of having this discussion and having it posted is it's not going to be a surprise to the community and
Mhm.
it's out there. And I would suggest, and that I would ask that we have a posting of the amendment if it's going to be offered along with the meeting materials. Because otherwise, we're sitting at the dais and people are wondering, what the amendment is if it hasn't been posted with the materials. It also gives people an opportunity prepared to comment that night. Because people can people could sign up to comment on the amendment.
So are you asking me to ask the person who might be proposing an amendment to
Well,
post something?
I think if they're going to offer it, if it's going to be offered, that it's good practice to post it, and also it allows people to come comment on it.
But they
'Cause-
could comment against it too.
Well,
Like these,
that's what I
because
meant.
You're
I
already
mean,
gonna publish
it's-
this. Yeah. So,
Okay. Do you know who's going to be offering an amendment?
Well, that amendment came from Director Hollins.
Okay.
And again, I just think it's not great practice for us to be talking about an amendment sometimes if we
Right.
haven't posted it. So
I agree.
if we know in advance, again, trying to speed up the timeline and also give people an opportunity to comment on it if they want to, because anything the board votes on, we have, I think, 3 comment slots.
Okay.
In addition to the underlying second reading if we get there.
Okay.
So we're,
we had some really good comments here. We should have again at the board meeting.
from a staff perspective, is there anything on that topic?
Yeah, if I
No, I think you talked through the examples. I mean, the policy on policies lists the examples. I do think if the board if the amendment were adopted by a majority of the board, there's an option for the board to vote it in that night if their timing is a concern. So that is enlisted in the policy on policies. But generally, when there's a substantive amendment, it starts another 21-day period, but the board has discretion to do that, if that's your question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll make sure to, when we get that posted for the second reading, I'll check with Director Hollins about whether he wants to, if he intends to offer it, because I think best practice is we should just.
Is it the same one that's been in these materials?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So the last item, and we're not going to go deep on it, but I just want to flag it for future reference, is a potential change to our, the way that we elect board members. Currently, we elect board members. You have to run from one of the 7 zones, and then you're elected by citywide or school district-wide. And we have the option to do it just by zone. So to elect them just by zone, which as other jurisdictions across the city are moving towards more like district representation, partly also to make it manageable from a running for office standpoint, that looking at doing, potentially switching to that. So that'll be on future agendas as we move ahead. And I think we'll have some more we have to get, the elections office would also need to work with us in order to implement it. So we'll have more information on implementation and what the elections office could do if we were to want to move, if we wanted to move ahead.
Same sense of.
Anything else? All right.
Director Brim-Rivers, I'm sorry, I didn't hear whether we were adjourned or not. Okay, thank you.